We're looking this morning at Matthew chapter 4. Continuing in our study together, so Matthew chapter 4, thank you for being here. We're anxious to get into the Word together. We're actually moving into verse 23 down through verse 25, and we're going to spend several Sundays looking at this passage. It, of course, is connected, we've connected it at least, with the verses 18 through 22, which we've been dealing with, which has to do, of course, with the calling of the four disciples. Peter and Andrew in verse 18 are called by Jesus from their fishing, and then in verse 22 or 21, James and John. This is kind of then added to that, and it's so connected with it that we brought it into and connected it because it kind of flows. And I want to show you how it does that, and then try to get into the feel and the tone of this passage. It is just really gripped me. Let's read from verse 18 down through the entirety of verse 25. Jesus, walking by the Sea of Galilee, saw two brothers, Simon called Peter and Andrew his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. Then he said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." And immediately they left their nets and followed him. Going from there, he saw two other brothers, James the son of Zebedee and John his brother, in the boat with Zebedee their father, mending their nets. And he called them. And immediately they left their boat and their father and followed him. And Jesus went about all Galilee. Sense this, feel this, will you? Jesus went about all Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the gospel of the kingdom, and healing all kinds of diseases, all kinds of sickness, and all kinds of diseases among the people. Then his fame went throughout all Syria, and they brought to him all sick people who were afflicted with various diseases and torments, and those who were demon-possessed, and epileptics, and paralytics, and he healed them all. Great multitudes followed him from Galilee and from Decapolis and Jerusalem and Judea and all beyond the Jordan. It's a powerful passage. One of the reasons it's so powerful, I think, is because it's a summary, and somehow, if I can explain this to you, he's setting up a foundation. He's establishing an overwhelming foundation for everything that's going to happen in the rest of the book. And he's been doing that, of course, in chapter 1, chapter 2, with the birth of Jesus and getting that all set up so that you see where Jesus is coming from and who he is in his very nature and what is taking place in the Christmas scene. And then he backs that up, of course, in this foundation thing with this overwhelming ministry of John the Baptist, and he really ties into that. But the real significance of John the Baptist thing is not just that he's a forerunner, but that he is going to baptize Jesus, and Jesus is going to become a spirit source man. And it's in that context that the Messiah, the one who's going to change everything around, is going to be a man. It isn't going to be God who does this. Oh, it is God. We understand. Jesus is God, the second member of the Trinity. So God is doing this. But it isn't going to be God as God that's going to do this. It's going to be a man filled with God that's going to pull this off. Have we gotten that far? Have we got a hold of that? That the first one in the kingdom of God is a man who's filled with God. He is God, I understand that, but he set aside all that he had as God and became a man, and it's going to be this man who's filled with God who's actually going to pull this off. So it isn't going to be man who's going to do it because God is going to do it, but God is going to use the avenue of man to get it done. So God isn't just going to wave magic wands, isn't just going to say words. Redemption can't come like that, see? God just can't sit in the sky and just say, well, I think I'll reverse this thing. He isn't just going to wipe everybody out and start all over like he did in the flood thing. This is a new deal, folks. And this is God who says, whatever it takes to get these people in, I'm going to go that far. Whatever it takes to get that done, Oh, if it takes becoming a man, if it takes giving up who I am, if it takes setting aside all that I have, if it takes the ultimate sacrifice of myself, if it takes the risking of a split in the Trinity, if it takes a possibility of the disruption of my own personal system, let it be, because these people are so valuable, I can't turn them loose. And whatever I have to do to get you in, he says, I'm going to do it, even down to becoming the worst person who ever lived on the earth. If that's what I have to become to get you in, I'm going to do it. It is interesting, isn't it, that Jesus didn't become the best person on the earth. He became the worst person on the earth. That's how he got you in. And ultimately, when he died on a cross, he became the worst among us. That's an awesome thought, isn't it? Redemption didn't come from the king's palace. It came from the streets. It came from one who was willing to embrace sin to the point that it became his own. And in that ownership of that your sin, he literally brought deliverance to you. That's the kind of sacrifice we're talking about. Because it was others who really mattered. It was people who were really significant. And whatever I have to do to get them in, he said, I'm going to do that. So here's a man filled with the Spirit who now is launching into this ministry that's literally going to set up a whole new kingdom and establish a whole new way and change the lives of people forever. Well, what is that ministry like? Well, it fulfills prophecy. We discovered that there was light that was going to dawn, and we saw that in chapter 4, verse 15 and 16. The prophecy is fulfilled as he moves into Galilee. And, of course, he comes, this Spirit-filled man, to literally move into calling disciples to himself. And as you get into this, you see a foundation being established. The focus in all of this is not on Jesus, who he is. How can I say this? The focus as you move through the book of Matthew then is not on Jesus in himself. In other words, you never hear about how handsome Jesus is. See, if I'd have been writing this about me, I'd have been, oh, he's tall, dark, and handsome. You know, he's got money. He's just, see, but you didn't hear anything about Jesus. You know, we don't even know the color of his eyes, man. See, there's no description. Because the focus isn't on him as a person. See, the focus is on, what's flowing through him and where he's going and the mission that God has for him and the fact that he's filled with the Spirit, and the Spirit is, see, the whole focus is on the movement of the Spirit of God through him. See, there's no emphasis on his education. There's no emphasis on his skill. There's nothing about, charismatic. Oh, you should have heard him in the quartet. Oh, he sang a solo, blew my socks off. See, nothing like that. There's nothing going on in the Gospels about that, because it isn't a focus on Jesus as the person. That sounds strange, doesn't it? Because it is on him. It's all about him. But the reason it's about him is because he's filled with God, and God is doing, the Father's doing something through him that's way beyond what human beings can do. So here's a human being who's being used so dramatically by God in ministry that you're just astounded at the God who flows through him. That's the foundation point upon which all of this rests. Now, out of this, he's going to do this summary that we're trying to deal with. And, of course, from that comes the theology, then, of chapter 5, chapter 6, and chapter 7. Here's the theology of a man who's filled with God. How does a man think who's filled with God? A spirit-sourced individual. How does he think? Sermon on the Mount. Turn the other cheek stuff. Give yourself away. Go the second mile. It's loaded with that stuff. And what's that all about? That's all about, here's how the mind of God thinks when it works through an individual. How can I know if I'm filled with God? Stack yourself up against the Sermon on the Mount. Do you think like that? Oh. It's awful to come to church and get beat up, isn't it? I hate it. Amazing. Because here's what a guy filled with the Spirit of God, here's his theology. Here's the root of his existence. And he just spills, and then, of course, he goes into all of these examples of how that plays out, and that's all the whole rest of the book. So, you see, the context, we're dealing with the context here. The context of this whole thing of everything that's going on in our passage is this spirit source man who's flowing with God, and the focus is not on him and his abilities and talents and personality. It's up on the flow of God and what that looks like and how that feels and what's going on in that. Now, the significant thing is the connection, and I want to talk about that a little bit, because the connection is with his disciples, and that's why these two passages are connected. And we didn't deal with them separately. So verse 18 through 22 is about what? Well, Jesus has chosen his disciples. And then you move into this verse 23. And Jesus went about all Galilee. It's interesting, in the Greek sentence, in the Greek text, the word Jesus is not there. I'm not saying it's wrong that we put it there. It's a part of the translation into English to make it flow and make it know that that it is Jesus we are dealing with. But obviously, in the Greek language, it's a pronoun, he, which is connected with the verb. So the word Jesus is not there. So the focus is, again, not on Jesus as the person, but on his attachment to the disciples. See, he's come to the Sea of Galilee, and he's reached out and grabbed a hold of these two, reached out and grabbed a hold of those two, and he's pulled them together as disciples, and he's taking them. He is connected with them. This was not a visitation. This was not a one-night deal. This was not a crusade and they attended. They've been doing that. This is a guys who are at fishing, and he calls them to attach themselves to him, and indeed they do that. In fact, that is further emphasized with the verb went about, which is really interesting. Because in the English translation, it's not quite clear. It doesn't give the emphasis of the word itself. Periago is the Greek word for went about. And peri is the word about, which is in the translation. And ogo is the idea to lead, to go, to carry. So there's this idea, and what's interesting about this word is it's only used 6 times in the whole New Testament. And the reason that's so significant is because it's not a word that has lots of applications. So you just see it everywhere, and it's used here in this situation, used in that situation, used in that situation. It's not that way. It's isolated in the situations that this word can be used, because it's only used 6 times. And the situations in which this word is used is the idea that someone is going around moving locations. So you got the itinerant ministry of Jesus taking place in Galilee. We understand that. He traveled from city to city to city and did this ministry thing. But connected with that is not just Jesus going around. Connected with that is he took these other guys with him. And the emphasis of the word is he went around with them. So everywhere Jesus went, these guys went. They participated in the crusades. They participated in the ministry. They were in the audience. They were listening. They were observing, but they were participating as well. So there's this whole idea of the linkage between Jesus and his disciples. They are moving together, and it's in the emphatic, which means it is so definite. He won't let you get away from that. So you see, he's moved from calling 4 guys into, hey, I'm taking them with me. He's called them to ministry. Well, what on earth does the ministry look like? He's going to tell you what the ministry looks like, which brings us to the content. Now, you will notice in verse 19, and we've talked about it so much, but Jesus says, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. So he's calling them to be fishers of men, which I've tried to emphasize with you and want to do it again because it's such a key. I will make you, meaning I'm not going to train you to be this, not meaning I'm going to teach you techniques to get this done. I'm going to have Saturday seminars and you'll learn how to pull this off, but I'm going to make you, meaning I'm going to change the focus of the internal of your life until this becomes the focus of your whole system. In other words, you have been focused on fishing, which is not bad. I want you to continue that focus. But your focus has been on fish. And do you realize how puny fish is compared to people? So I'm going to change your focus from fish to people. What I wouldn't give to do that for you and me. Well, what do you mean focus on fish? Well, it's their job. It's their occupation. It's what they do every day. It's how they make a living. You think it's wrong to make a living? No, please, no. You think I ought to give up my job? They did, not wanting you to do that. So this is keep doing the fish thing. But the focus in the fish thing is not the fish. It's the people. And the focus is not upon, I'm going to make money. The focus is upon, oh, how can I win the people that are all around me? The early church thrived on that. Because the early church, the genius of the early church was the fullness of the Spirit, and then persecution came to Rome, and they just scattered like rats. I mean, the Christians just went everywhere. And every Christian was a full-time, down-to-it, called of God minister. And he didn't focus on making money or focus on a living or focus on things. He focused on people. And they kept their vocations. But everywhere they went, they were full-time. And when they went down to their job, they saw themselves as missionaries, evangelists at their job. So their job was the platform by which they won their world. So can you imagine these people getting together on a Sunday morning celebrating the resurrection? And then they said, whoa, they hit the streets, man. That is, they went to their jobs and they ministered all week long. And then they came back to the local church. And the reason they had such trouble in the local church is because everybody wanted to give a report of the ministry that they had had that week. And sit down, it's my turn. No, you sit down, it's my turn. And everybody came and their services were filled with this hilarity and this praise because everyone came and said, oh, this week, you won't believe what God did at my job. I've been working on this guy and I've been praying for him. And in fact, he's here this morning. Right there he is. Stand up, man. Whoa, and God saved him this week. And the ministry happened out there and they got together on Sunday morning to report it. Because they weren't focused on fish, the focus had changed from fish to people. That would change seems to me that would change your whole view of your job, wouldn't it? Instead of, this stinking job, I hate this job. It would change it to, whoa, God has called me. What an opportunity I've got. I'm going to get to rub shoulders with people I never would know if it weren't for this job. And the focus changed from fish to people. Well, who are these people that we're dealing with? That's what he talks about in this passage. Who are these others, these people? Let me read it to you again. Look at this. Jesus went about all Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the gospel of the kingdom, healing all kinds of sickness. Sick people. All kinds of diseases. Ooh, don't get close to me. His fame went throughout all Syria. Ooh, foreigners. And they brought to him all sick people. Back to sick people again. Who were afflicted. Ooh, afflicted people. Probably can see it. With various diseases and torments. Tormented people. And those who were demon-possessed. Oh, that's scary. Epileptics. Oh, have fits. Paralytics. Oh, crippled people. And he healed them all. Do you suppose he had any decent people in his congregation? I mean, wouldn't you like to get a nice family who had it together? Mercy. Just to be sure we got it, I want to list them for you. Start with this, the incurable. Did you notice the strong emphasis? Now, you got to put yourself in their shoes, that is, in their cultural setting. Put yourself in their cultural setting, the medicine and the medical knowledge that's available in that hour, and think through their eyes. Do you realize what he's listing here? He's listing all the incurables. See, if it was just, oh, I'll take an aspirin and a cup of coffee and feel better. I don't know how that could possibly be, but anyhow, if that could be, then I'll feel better. I'll feel better. They wouldn't be coming. But the reason these people are coming to Jesus is because they are beyond help. And the way he lists this, do you see such strong, all kinds of diseases and all kinds of sickness and paralytics and epileptics and demon-possessed. And it's like he's trying to list every kind of category that he can possibly think of to tell you there wasn't one single individual that Jesus said, don't bring him. He's too far gone. He's uncurable. Listen, I can do 95% of it, but I can't do that. That's in the 5%. I can't. No, I'm not interested in that. That he's saying there is no area, there is no condition, there is no situation that the spirit-sourced man, get this, the spirit-sourced man can't walk into, and redemption can't take place. There is no scene that you've got to tremble over because, oh, that's a tough one. We can't, we don't dare get into. That every door will open up and every barrier has to come down. And there is no, see, you get into the teaching of the kingdom in all of this because John the Baptist's big deal is the kingdom has come. And so you've got all of a sudden in the gospel account and in Matthew, and it's starting right here. You've got this kingdom of God and this kingdom of Satan thing, and you've got this war going on. And as you get into the miracles of Jesus, what were they all about? They were an invasion of the demonic kingdom. As we've said before, this was not medical techniques. This was not a medical procedure that Jesus was doing. This was an invasion of a demonic kingdom. That's taking place. You understand that all sickness is a result of sin. What? Indirectly. I don't think we've got any problem with that or have any choice on that, do we? There was no sickness in the Garden of Eden. Man fell, the earth became cursed, and sickness was a result of the general curse of sin. Not your personal sin, not saying that. Job cleared that up. The book of Job cleared that up. That Job got sick, but it wasn't a result of anything he had done. It was a war that was going on between two kingdoms. Jesus cleared that up. A man is blind. The disciples said, who sinned, him or his parents? Somebody messed up big time. Jesus said it's for the glory of God, because this situation is an occasion where the kingdom of God can march in and conquer the kingdom of Satan. This is an invasion, man. We're here to take over. Stand back, world. We're going to invade you. That's what's going on here. So what's going on in the passage is not a focus. Don't get wrapped up in the miracles. Don't get wrapped up in, oh, he delivered them from that. Don't get wrapped up in that stuff. Get wrapped up in, oh, the kingdom is conquering. Oh, there's nobody that can't be won. Oh, there's nothing that can't be changed in the life. Oh, there is no habit that deliverance can't come. Oh, there is nothing that's incurable. Come on. There is no one who can't be yanked out of that. There is no one that can't be redeemed. There is no one who's gone so far they cannot be brought back. There is no one, no condition, no situation in your life where victory cannot be. You remember the Matthew 28, the Great Commission thing, and he says, all authority, this is a spirit-sourced man talking, all authority has been given to me. It's pretty broad. Pretty broad. But you understand, the emphasis here is on people. 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 It's the people that matter. It isn't, I got the power to do miracles. That's not the point. The point is people's lives are being changed. I don't think you can come up to Jesus and say, I know you on your computer, Jesus, have been keeping track of how many blind people you healed and how many deaf people heard and how many. I doubt it. Because it wasn't about numbers to report at the district assembly. It wasn't about how many. It wasn't about how much. It was about people. It was about people. People. It wasn't about, whoa, look what I did. It was about all people. People. It wasn't about my great spiritual accomplishment. It was about people. See, somehow it seems to me that's where, if you want to ask me, why don't we see more miracles today? That would be my explanation. That we're so wrapped up in doing miracles which focus on, whoa, look what I did, which destroys the whole thing. If we could be invisible and do miracles and nobody would know we did them, wow, wouldn't that be something? Because people matter. People are the deal. Let me give you another idea as you look at this list. Not only the incurable, but the inclusive. It's all inclusive. And we've indicated that. But no one is left out. No one. Not in this list. Again, there is no group that is left out. There's no person that is left out. They're all included. In fact, as you get into it, you begin to see that he gives you 3 categories that can be listed. For instance, if you go down to verse 24, his fame went throughout all Syria, and they brought to him all sick people who were afflicted with various diseases and torments. Then he begins to list these things. Demon possessed. Wow. We're bumping into that more and more. Demon possessed. You realize that's a spiritual condition. So we're dealing with people who are spiritually demon possessed. Well, I'm not demon possessed. I'm just self-centered. I'm just full of myself. Think about myself all the time, all wrapped up in myself. My whole life is about me. All my pains and agonies and disruptions and discomfort and depressions and everything is just about me and more me and more me. And I'm not demon possessed. What do you think that is? That's demonic nature. No, there may not be an actual demon that's indwelt you, but that's the very nature of the devil himself, because that's who he is. That's his whole kingdom. So he's talking about demon-possessed people, which is a spiritual thing. And we know, and I don't know how far you want to go with this, but we know that demon possession, that kind of thing, literally produces a physical reactions. For instance, a man was, and this is so biblical, a man was mute. He could not speak. And why? He was demon-possessed. Jesus cast out the demon and the man spoke. What do you want to do with it? Now, there's no indication in the scriptures that everyone who was sick was demon-possessed. It never says that. No. I can give you scriptures that say the opposite of that. So nobody's saying everybody who's sick is demon-possessed, but there certainly is a physical result from a demonic self-centeredness that possesses you. Just really intrigues me, folks. That we'll do all of these things God doesn't want us to do, and a physical thing will happen in our lives as a result of that, and then we'll blame God. Duh! I've never figured that one out. If you wanted to blame someone, why don't you blame the devil? He would be the one that caused that. God isn't out to get you. God doesn't make you sick. We all understand that. Come on. So make it very clear in your mind. Nobody here, I don't know, nobody here believes that because you do something wrong, God's going to punish you by making you sick. But when you don't live in his grace and in the flow of the kingdom of God, there are physical consequences that can come out of that. We understand that, don't we? So there's this whole area of demon possession. Well, suppose I am demon possessed. There is no devil that can stand up against him. This is an invasion. This is an invasion of the kingdom of God into the kingdom of the devil. And there is no situation and no bondage in the inner spirit of man and nothing that grips any of us at the depth of our souls that the fingers can't be pried loose. And this is not a, come on, loosen up, will you? This is a, whoa, folks, look what we got at our disposal. The kingdom of God, the spirit-filled man, the sourcing of the Spirit of God can march into our lives and bring phenomenal, overwhelming release and victory. We are a free people. There's nothing that's excluded from the movement of his Spirit. Not only is there the demon possessed, but he calls them the epileptic. The Greek word literally means moonstruck. It has to do with the mind. Now, I don't know what you want to do with all of this, but this whole category of the mental and the nervous system, this word seems to attach itself to that whole area. And the mental stress and the mental diseases. Is there anything, did not God create the mind? What would happen if I'd open up my mind and say, Jesus, invade my mind? What would happen if I'd pray, oh, give me the mind of Christ? If I could think like he thinks, how would that correct? If the Spirit of God could invade my mental. I'm not talking about getting smart. I'm not talking about knowing data. I'm talking about if my mind could just be at rest, invaded by the Spirit of God. That whole area. He talks about paralytics, and the paralytics, of course, are the physically handicapped. And it's really interesting that the Pharisees wanted nothing to do with any of these people. They based that on the fact that a sacrifice that was offered to God had to be without spot or blemish. So obviously, if you're going to be attached to God, you cannot. See, you can't run over your lamb and then offer him to God as a sacrifice. You know? Oh, you can feed your sick chicken to the preacher, but you can't offer it to God. See, you can't do that. You guys are really tight this morning. I don't know what your problem is. But you can't offer it to God. You see, the lamb has to be without spot and without blame. And so they attached that. If anybody's going to come before God, and so they set up, they put the limits. They wouldn't let any handicapped person even be in the temple. Isn't it interesting when Jesus cleaned house, when he came in and cleansed the temple? Oh, it says distinctly, all these people, all these handicapped folks, all these sick people, all these poor people, because they thought poor was also a handicap. So all of these people came back and entered into the temple, and there was rejoicing and miracles taking place because they were welcome. Why? Because that's the kingdom of God. So it's people that matter. It isn't about demon possession. It's about people. See, it isn't about mental stuff. It's about people. See, it isn't about crippled or non-crippled. It's about people. See, the whole emphasis here is on people matter. People. People are the deal. People. Yeah, let me give you another one. There's also the international emphasis. I thought this was really, wow. Verse 24, then his fame went throughout all Syria. That's a foreign country. See, there was such a stir going on in Galilee, and there was such a movement taking place, and the fame of Jesus, I mean, they just begin to talk about it. It just, you know how the Nazarene grapevine is. Whoa, yak, yak, yak. it was everywhere, all over Palestine. It goes down into Jerusalem, Judea, beyond the Jordan, and the Decapolis, all of this. And it even went outside the borders of the Jews and went into Syria. And these foreigners came. Interesting to me. The word fame there means to hear something. Some scholars talk about it like a radio wave. It just, and even it went all over, even into Syria. It's interesting to me the things that divide us. I don't think I've mentioned this here, but in some meetings I've been talking about blue eyes. I'm really into blue eyes. I think blue-eyed people are superior. In fact, I've been thinking about starting another church, which would be a church plant of blue-eyed people, because I think we would probably be the best looking of the community, and we would have the most money. And then you know what would happen. Of course, there would be people who'd put on blue contacts just to fake us out, and so we'd have to have a doctor at the door to be sure that there aren't any hypocrites in our church, because you can only have you say that's stupid. Well, that would be stupider. Interesting. But that's we've done that, folks. It wasn't but 15, 20 years ago there were the divorced and the non-divorced. Now, we didn't mind if the divorced people came because they put money in the offering, but you were less than what we non-divorced people are. We could hold offices, you couldn't. In fact, when we started in the ministry, we were pastoring a church, you couldn't join the church. You could come to our church as a divorced person, but you couldn't join. Because you just... Do you see anything? See, we have those attitudes that you're not on my level. Where does that come from? See, there isn't anything like that. Jesus, do you see the mind of Christ in all of this and who he is? He never looks at a person where he sees that person as, well, you're inferior. You're not worth my power. You're not worth my interest. You're what the situation, well, none of that shows up. It's people that matter. People. Well, what color are they? Didn't matter. Well, what's their background? Didn't matter. Well, where'd they come? Didn't matter. Well, were they abusive? Didn't matter. Didn't matter. Nothing mattered, but they're people. People. And the whole thrust here is about, people. Let me give you another one. Gotta hurry. Innumerable. Oh, look at this, verse 23 and 24. He went about all Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the gospel of the kingdom, healing all kinds of sickness, all kinds of disease. His fame went throughout all Syria. They brought to him all sick people who were afflicted. All great multitudes. Great. How do you count them? There's too many. There was one place, and isn't it interesting that they were never counted? There's one place, of course, that's indicated that 5,000 men were in the congregation, and he fed them. There's another that indicates there was 4,000 men. This is besides women and children. But in fact, on Palm Sunday, when they were waving the palm branches, and Jesus was riding the donkey, the Pharisees stood on the street corner and said, "Oh, good night. The whole world's gone after him." This is massive, folks. This is massive. The barriers are all removed. This is. But Jesus was never into the numbers. He was into the people. It was about people. See, if you're in the numbers, somebody bumps you and you don't turn around and say, somebody touched me. And find a woman who's healed. You don't mess with her. Why? Because that's one. I've got 5,000 out here. I don't have time for... But that was never the attitude of Jesus. The attitude of Jesus was people, oh people, people, they're what matters. Let me give you the last one. Income. Did you note Jesus' salary in this? Did you note how big the offerings were? Well, you say that isn't in here. You're smart. That's the whole point. Did you note in here about how he had this big ranch, 500 acres, with $1 million house on it? You say that's not there. Oh. Oh, come on. What was his angle? What did he get out of this? What was the agenda? What did he really want? Why did he mess with all these people? What motivated him? What drove him? Listen, when you got to send one of your disciples down to the river, down to the Sea of Galilee, to catch a fish and take a coin out of a fish's mouth to pay your taxes, you haven't got much money. And it's always impressed me that a Jesus that could take a handful of loaves and a handful of fish and just and feed 5,000 men besides women and children could have had a chain of restaurants across the countryside and been a millionaire overnight. And he never even thought about it. Never even thought about it. It wasn't, oh, I'd like to do that, but I don't dare. He never even thought about it. It didn't enter his mind. Why? Because he's a spirit-filled man. And a spirit-filled man has the heart of the Father and the mind of the Father. And the heart of the Father is all about what? You know the Father doesn't give a rip about gold. What would he care about gold? The Father doesn't care about big mansions. What would God want a big mansion for? The Father's not into that kind of stuff. What is the Father into? There's only one thing the Father's into. It's people, people, people. How can I rescue people? How can I get through to people? How can people's lives be changed? People, people, people. Others, others, others. And Jesus had the heart of the Father, which was about what? Others, others, others. And when you see Jesus, you're seeing a man filled with the mind of the Father who's got one agenda and one thing. How can I help? How can I get through to you? How can I roll up my sleeves? How can I meet your need? How can I pour my life out for you? Others, 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 others. That's the whole deal. Because he has the mind of the Father. How can I tell whether Stephen Manley is full of the Spirit? If I am filled with the Spirit, if I have the mind of the Father, what am I into? What's my agenda? What drives me? I'm embarrassed, Jesus. I'm embarrassed with my selectivity. Who I select to be interested in and who I just write off. I'm embarrassed that my focus has been on fish. While your focus has been on others. I'm embarrassed that I go to a small church and hold a revival, and underneath it all, no, they aren't going to pay me enough. Wasted my time. When there were people there. People. I'm embarrassed that a crowd of 1,000 turns me on and I can preach like fire. But a crowd of 20, brother. Would you do something in my life? Would you? There are all kinds of tags in my life that tell me I don't have your mind. I want your mind. I want you. Would you, heads are bowed, would you be willing to pray with me this morning? Twofold, that we as a church would have the mind of Christ. And it would be people, not our image. It would be people. Not how the Pharisees view us. It would be people. 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 Oh, people. Others. Not our reputation. Would you pray with me that not only as a church we would have that mind, but would you pray with me that I as an individual, and maybe you if you want to get in on it, would have the mind of Christ. And I really want you to get this. That it isn't evangelism that becomes the center. It isn't others and doing miracles that become the center. That isn't the center. Jesus is the center, and because he's the center, I have these feelings, I have this drive, I have this. Otherwise, it gets all messed up. And miracles become the big deal. And how many did you do? And deliverances become the big deal. And how many were delivered? And attendance becomes the big deal. And see, it isn't growing a church that's the big deal. It's I got to have the mind of Christ. And in the mind of Christ, I begin to have this drive for others. That's the only way this could possibly work. So I've got to seek the mind, seek the heart, seek the fullness, seek, oh God, cleanse out all the hidden agendas. Purify my mind. Would you risk that with me? Would you risk what that would do to you? You might find yourself neglecting yourself because you've spent so much time on yourself. Others. Fullness of Christ. Driven by his heart. Altars are available for you. What would you like to do with this?